Welcome to Strategy First. I am Straj. Today I will be talking about how to do DPS. With me, I have picked my first character here to show you guys, which is a Dragonknight, Dark Elf. It is a Fire Mage. I do have to give props to Deltia, Deltia's Gaming. I did look at his Laceration build for the start of this character. I have tweaked it and made a few of my own personal adjustments. Armor is going to make a huge difference when you get your character up there. I'm not going to go over all the armors, but if you're going for a weapon or stamina based character, you are going to want to get Hunting's Rage. There are other possibly better for you sets out there, but that is generally a good go-to stamina armor set for 5-piece. You can get that crafted as well, really easy to get. If you're going for magic, I'm actually using with my character Julianos. But Julianos is about the spell damage and spell critical. Potions are going to be very important for your character builds. If you're going just for magic or just for stamina, you don't need to get a tri-stat potion. A character that's not using all three, or that can use something besides just two, like health and stamina or health and magic, you will want one that is giving you maybe weapon damage, critical, maybe even just immovability so you don't get knocked down. You know, you're not stunned, you're able to move around, dodge stuff, do your damage. Also very important when designing a character, you need to figure out if you want to go for max stamina or max magic. If you are going for spell damage, you want max magic. If you are going for weapon damage, you want max stamina. This will also determine what kind of weapons you use. If you are using a physical weapon, like two-handed, one-handed shield, dual wield, those are bow. That's going to be more weapon damage. But you can still use stuff like dual wield to buff your magic bar. So you could, as long as you understand your weapon's physical, but you're buffing your magic bar, that works for dual wield. Destruction Staff and Resto Staff are both going to scale off of your spell damage and max magic. All of your abilities, be they weapon or spell damage, are going to scale off of either your max magic or your max stamina, as well as your weapon damage or your spell damage. Spell damage always goes with max magic. Weapon damage always goes with max stamina. So the more stamina or magic you have, the more damage your character is doing. That's why you want to pick one and not try to focus on both, because if you try to do both, you'll have reduced damage. You do want to probably start off with about 20,000 max health at an end-game character, so that will help you stay alive, because if you're down, you're not doing damage. Sustain is very important. Speaking of sustain, if you have lots of max magic and max stamina, it's really easy to sustain for a short period of time with lots of resources. However, a lot of people will freak out about recovery. Recovery is very important if you cannot sustain. If you find yourself sitting there waiting to get magic or stamina back, you need more recovery. If recovery is not an issue for you, you don't want recovery. You want max magic or max stamina to increase your damage. If you freak out too much over recovery, you're going to take a huge DPS drop. And again, we already know how stuff stacking is going to make a big difference, even if it looks small. There are ways to sustain your magic and stamina without putting stuff in recovery. A lot of this will take personal skill. Learning to weave, the occasional heavy attack in can be a huge help. But going under skills, I find there are lots of abilities like my Elemental Drain, which I use for my Major Breach. It also gives me 488 magic back every time I do a flame attack. As a Flame Mage, everything I'm doing is flame-based, so I'm getting lots and lots of magic back. Templars have a rune they can put down, which will give them magic back when they run through it, and it will last for 8 seconds after they've left it. And it stays down for like 22 seconds, so you end up with almost 30 seconds of getting magic back if you just keep running through it once every 8 seconds. Your Night Blades are going to have lots of regen bonuses. The ability to sap resources from enemies and get resources back from attacks. As a Dragonknight, I can also use my ultimate to get back magic, health, and stamina. Sorcerers can turn magic into stamina and stamina into magic. There are lots of ways to sustain within your abilities where you don't need recovery. But if that takes time away from your attacks and you're not doing damage while doing it, then it's going to hurt your damage. So you need to really find a balance. How low can you have your recovery while still increasing your max resources and not running out of resources? If you are a magic or a stamina build that uses a little bit of both abilities, it is very useful, because then, oh look, I'm low on magic, I'm going to use some stamina for a bit to get my magic back. Oh, I'm low on stamina, I'm going to use my magic for a bit. Even if it's just buffs. My personal skills here, I'm using Structured, which gives me 20% plus in power. I've got my Breath to make the weaker by 10%. I've got my Standard to do 20% more, so all this stuff is stacking. Got my Burning Embers for my primary big damage and for my heal. I'm also getting small heals from Structured, so you can see where I'm healing myself. My Flame Lashes, my spammable attack, which also gives me heals. So, I mean, I'm getting heals from 4 of my abilities. I'm getting damage buffs from 3 of my abilities. I've got my dot over time and my spammable. No, 4, I'm sorry. I get damage buffs from 4 of my abilities, and I have my dot over time and my spammable. On my primary bar, I'm using all of my abilities. I'm not just using this on its own, that on its own. You know, if I've got 3 dots on him, I'm spamming, getting a buff from that, a buff from that. Every single ability is working at the same time once I get them on, and I just need to keep them on. Like Structured, Burn, Standard, Embers. You know, I didn't even get to put everything on that guy. But you get to see how all my abilities work together. If you're not using an ability, or if there's an ability that's not helping all the time, it's a waste of a slot. If there's something that's situational, it should be either on the back bar or only equip it when that situation you know is going to come up. Situational abilities are nice to have, but they shouldn't be primarily on your main bar. Everything should be buffing everything else. Again, it's all about stacking this game. Stack. I want to stack my buffs, I want to stack my damage, I want to stack my abilities, and that way my character is 2, 3, 8 times stronger, and people are like, how the hell do you do this? On my back bar, even though, I still want to have stuff that's stacking my primary bar. I could use it like a buff bar or abilities that work for a long period of time. And yes, I do have some situational stuff. So I mean, I've got like weakness to elements that helps with my sustain. It lasts a long time, makes it weaker, so all my abilities are doing more damage. I've got my Eruption, which is, you know, good for AoE, crowd control, slows them down, lasts for a long time. So I'm doing damage with that while I'm doing my primary bar. I've got my Fire Rune, which again works for kind of a small AoE, does damage over time, so still doing damage while I'm on my primary bar. And I've got my Elemental Ring, which is a Ring of Fire, which again dots damage over time, doing damage to them from my back bar while I'm on my front bar. I did that initial damage, I can switch bars, and you can see his health just kind of dropping from that one ability. It's not a lot, but every bit counts. It's still damaging me, so I can drop that, and finish him off. So it's helping out the whole time. Everything on my back bar is helping my primary bar. I do currently have Inner Light slotted on both because it is a toggleable ability, and I don't want to have to waste time turning it back on. And I've got it to where it's increasing max magic, which of course increases the damage. I use Flame Lash currently, and here it is with some food eaten, which is just over 7k, which gives me a good spammable damage. And if they're off balance, it becomes Power Lash, which is now dealing over 9k, and stuns them for 2 seconds, as well as heals me for a ridiculous amount over 2 seconds. I've got Fire Ring, good AoE, also does good dot damage, so even against a single target, I may plop this on once, and then switch over to my primary bar. There's my Inner Light again. I've got Scalding Ruin, which is another good dot. I can put this on even against a single target, switch over to my other bar, but it is also an AoE, and as a Mage's Guild ability, it will also give me that Empower from Might of the Guild for the next attack. I've got Eruption, which is a very powerful, long-lasting, but expensive AoE. It says it does 4,300 physical damage every 0 seconds. It's actually every 0.5 seconds. But the amount of damage this thing is doing over those 18 seconds is huge. It is, with the initial second, it is doing well over 10,000 damage. And then every second after that, if they stay in the area, it's doing just shy of 8,000 physical damage. Now, a lot of my buffs are for magic-based stuff, so it does not get buffed as much as my other abilities, but it does get some buffs. So I could easily get this thing over 10k a second. Now, some of my abilities I will switch out. If I need more survivability and less sustain, I may put on Coagulating Blood or Deep Breath. Deep Breath is good for a replacement AoE damage ability if I want to still be fighting large groups, and it's good for heals if I'm fighting large groups. If I'm more fighting a single boss or at range, I may want Coagulating Blood over that just for the survivability. Dragon's Fire Scales, very good if I'm being fired for reflecting projectiles. Good for both survivability and doing massive damage. In Maelstrom Arena, the damage this thing can do is amazing. It increases my damage while also protecting me, but only from ranged projectiles. I may also switch out occasionally my Magma Shell for Shooting Star. Shooting Star is better just being equipped because it is a Mage's Guild ability, which will increase my max magic, thus increasing my damage on that bar. But Magma Shell is very good if I need to be tanky for short periods of time, if my teammates keep going down and I have to revive them, or if there's a phase I have problems surviving. Molten Armaments is something I'm upgrading right now. I don't really use it except for a occasional finisher when fighting single targets on my back bar. However, with the next update, it is going to get a huge buff, and it will definitely be reevaluated and worth using. Igneous Shield's good if I need help surviving, both for myself and my team, and it will help me increase my healing by 30%, so I'll be healing myself massively when I put this on. If I need healing through something like Maelstrom Arena, extremely useful. So, on to Destruction Staff. Some other abilities I may switch out, and if you've noticed, all these abilities I may switch out will be from my back bar. I will usually switch out Fire Ring, Eruption, and Elemental Drain. Elemental Drain, if other people are using the Major Breach, I don't need it except for sustain, so if I replace it with something cheap like Destructive Touch, very useful. Also though, if I have problems with sustain after dropping that, I want to drop my Eruption. If I need range, I can use Force Pulse in place of my Lava Whip, actually on my primary bar. Always, if you need defense, Harness Magic is useful for getting that magic back, as well as defending yourself from massive damage. And something else that I've been wanting to try out for a while is Barrier. Now, currently I don't have this one unlocked on this character. However, the thing about Barriers, it gets stronger as I level it up. I've not even purchased it yet. You can see it says it does over 39,000 damage it will protect me from. I've got, like, nothing in Bastion. If I increase this thing by 25%, I could easily get this thing up to 50,000 damage it would protect me from. That is huge. Now, moving on to abilities, that's the part that everyone wants to hear. First off, you have major and minor skills. You cannot stack multiple majors of the same kind. You cannot stack multiple minors of the same kind. But you can have a major and a minor of something, and they will stack. For instance, Major Sorcery will give me 20% increase in damage from spells. Minor Sorcery will give me 5%. I can have a minor and a major sorcery to get 25%. I cannot have two major sorceries to get 40%. that is not the only thing you could do. You're not limited to just major sorcery and minor sorcery. You have major and minor breach and fracture for spell and physical weakness. The major is over 5k weakness. The minor is over 1k weakness. If you have both of these, you will have well over 6k weakness to either physical attacks or elements, or both. And since goes on the enemy, it works for your entire team as well, not just you. You can find major brutality under some of the weapon skills, like two-handed with rally. The minors you will find, however, under class-specific skills. For instance, my Dragonknight here with Earthen Heart has a passive Mountain's Blessing. Gives you ultimate, and in addition it grants minor brutality to all allies within 30 meters. That is a huge range, but it increases everybody's weapon damage by 5% for 20 seconds. Dragoknights do the brutality for weapon damage, Templars do the sorcery for spell damage, Nightblades actually have a crit bonus to weapon damage, and Sorcerers have a crit bonus to spells. Empower is another buff. It gives you 20%, but only to your next one attack. Berserk, again, another minor and major. Berserk is going to give you major 25% damage increase, and a minor of 8% damage increase. So with both of these, that could be a 33% damage increase. This is the second largest increase you could get in the game. With crits, you also have major savagery, minor savagery, major proficiency, and minor proficiency. We already mentioned about how you can get the minors from Sorc and Nightblade passives. The majors you could get from your guild skill lines. You can get from the Fighters Guild the Expert Hunter, which just being slotted increases your weapon critical rating by like 20%. And under the Mages Guild, your Inner Light, which currently is a toggle-on ability, but eventually will be slottable just having it equipped like the Fighters Guild ability, where it will do the same thing at 10% spell critical chance increase. Now, spell critical or weapon critical is very important because it might not seem like a lot at 10%, but 10% of the time, if you're doing 150% more damage, that's going to be big, but also that depends on your build. And there are other things you can do to bring your critical up by almost an additional 50%, which can bring it well over 200% increase in damage. So if you have all that on, and you're doing 200% more, 10% of the time, that's a huge increase. Speaking of crit damage, you have Major Force and Minor Force. Currently, I only know of a few ways of getting these. Under the Fighters Guild skill line, you have the Trap Beast, which gives you Minor Force, 12% damage increase. And under the Assault skill line, you've got Warhorn, which, when morphed to Aggressive Warhorn, gives you Major Force, which is a 30% damage increase. That is huge. This is the hugest buff in the game when you combine both of those, and anybody can do it. However, it is only for your critical damage. So if you're not getting a crit, you're not getting that buff. And the 30% is only for 8 seconds, so unless you have a crit build, this is not something that is going to be nearly as big as it looks like. But if you do have high critical chance, a good crit build going for your character, then you can easily increase your damage by over 42%. And again, this stacks with other stuff, so that becomes huge. Bringing this all together, all of these buffs, if you happen to hit with a crit and have all of them on, which I don't know if any character can actually have all of them on at once, but potentially, if you could eventually, you could get over 6k weakness to an enemy, which is better if you're fighting a tank. But if you're fighting someone with almost no wing resistance, it's still going to increase your damage, but it's going to be by a smaller percentage. But still, that is a lot of weakness. So potentially you could be doing, like, I guess 6 more K damage. I'm not 100% sure how the weakness works, but it just seems to do way better against tanks than anyone else, and it is extremely useful when fighting someone who you're having a hard time killing as a DPS. And yes, the crit chance, you can get up to 15% with minors and majors, and there are other things you can do to increase your crit chance as well. But throwing those two aside and just looking at the buffs between Empower, which is 20%, your Major Sorcery or Brutality and Minors, which comes to 25% more, your 33% from Major and Minor Berserk, and your 42% from Major and Minor Force, you have the potential of increasing your character, if you get a critical hit, by 120% with that alone. And there are many other abilities in the game to increase your character that stacks with those. Now, what I mean by stacks is very, very important, because say you have that 120% increase, and you use something that gives you 20% more damage, like I use my standard. If I get that 20% more increase, it is not actually 20% of what my skill says. Which, if I was to look at, say, my Flame Lash, it's almost 7k. It's not going to be 20% of 7k, because if I've already got all those buffs on, which has bumped me by 120%, that buff is also going to be increased by 120%. So at that point, my standard would increase me by 44% of my base weapon damage. 44% of my almost 7k. I'm going to get over 3k buff for my Lash. And something like my Searing Strike could easily go from 15k damage to 30k damage. I mean, a 30,000 damage strike, that's huge. Because if I take it up 120% from 15k, I'm already over 30k. And then if I happen to get that 44% increase from standard, use my Burning Breath to get 10% weaker to fire damage, that stacks with my stuff. Use my standard for 20% more, that's going to stack with my stuff. Those two alone, stacking, becomes 66% increased damage if I'm running all that. Which my character is not currently running all of that, but you get the potential there. Anyway, I hope you liked this video on how to increase your DPS. Thank you for watching, and like and subscribe.